Hello and welcome to the Institute of Managers and Leaders, Australia and New Zealand. Thank you so much for joining us today, for giving up your time. We've got a huge day of learning and development planned for you for our second virtual development day for 2020. My name is Sam Bell and I'm the General Manager of Corporate Services here at the Institute, and it's my pleasure to bring you today's activities with four of Australia and New Zealand's top facilitators presenting some very, very diverse content. Today's topic is around courage through the crisis, understanding and developing resilience. Throughout the last 6 months, our members from across Australia and New Zealand have expressed to us their desire to hear more about the topic of resilience. Never has there been more a pressing time for both countries and indeed globally, where a global pandemic combined with an economic recession that we now face is certainly putting people under pressure, putting employers under pressure, and putting countries under pressure. And never before have we needed all the resilience that we require and we can build to get ourselves through this period and come out bigger and better afterwards. A little bit about the Institute before I start. Most of you will know this, but I will introduce a little bit about the Institute because we do have non-members who are paid guests today. The Institute of Managers and Leaders is Australia and New Zealand's largest professional body for management professionals. For 80 years, the Institute has been around, and we've had one core purpose, and that's to create better managers and better leaders for a better society. The Institute does this through initiatives such as today's Development Day. We host fortnightly webinars on key management and leadership topics. We also run masterclasses. They used to be face-to-face up until COVID. They have been running virtually, and every one of those sessions has been sold out, which shows the huge interest and hunger for learning and development for management professionals. In addition to that, the Institute has three terrific leadership programs, namely Essentials, Foundations, and Accelerate. They are all targeted at different competencies and different tiers of management and leadership. And I encourage you to jump on our website and have a look at each of those programs throughout today. And in addition to that, we also do in-house training and learning and development for organisations where we come in and deliver with our professional facilitators, four of which you'll hear from today. As I said, now more than ever, it's essential to focus on your well-being and the well-being of others. Key to this, and during these challenging times, having a network of people around you to support you through it and to learn and grow through this period is absolutely essential. And that's part of what today is all about. I do note, and I know that our organiser for today, Joe and Libby, who have done an enormous job to bring today together, would like me to pass on that we have a lunchtime networking session today. I think for New Zealanders, it might be more an afternoon tea networking session. But that is being hosted by Shannon, one of our facilitators here, who's presenting the last session. It is a sold-out networking event, but the team have told me that there is some tickets that they are releasing today for people on the live audience today, because we know some of those pre-registered ones maybe won't all attend. So we believe we've got a little bit of time. Now it'll be first in, first served. But please email info@managersandleaders.com.au. That's info@managersandleaders.com.au if you would like a ticket and a link to join that virtual networking session. It's going to be capped at 100. So as I said, first in, best dressed. But we do want to have a full house for that event where we are going to have each of the facilitators on hand for that networking session. We'll break into smaller groups and introduce ourselves and have a bit of a chat. So we do want to bring that lunchtime or afternoon tea networking for our New Zealanders to the fore, so please join that experience. Now, you all would have received an action plan. So today is all about learning and development, and we want you to take away some key learnings from each of the sessions. So we sent you an action plan. You should all have this. If you haven't got that, please once again email the info@managersandleaders.com.au email address, and they will send you the action plan. It's a document that will allow you to write down the three key initiatives you've learnt, or the three key takeaways that you've learnt from each of the sessions, which we believe is really important for you to after the session go back and reflect on as well. All the resources from today's session will be available So the resources that the facilitators will talk you through will be available and will be sent to you after the event. So we're hoping to get those to you tonight or first thing tomorrow morning after today's session. Any sales inquiries, as I've talked about, any in-house inquiries or leadership program inquiries, webinars, masterclasses, anything that you would like further information on, please don't hesitate to once again email us on info@managersandleaders.com.au. The team are sitting there waiting. They're happy to respond to any questions you may have and to provide as much information as possible. So without further ado, I might lead into our first session. I know we've got Nikki waiting there eagerly to jump on, and Nikki is our New Zealand facilitator, and we're so delighted to have a New Zealander on the facilitator list for today's session. A little bit about Nikki's session, Living an Intentional Life. We talk a lot at the Institute about intentional leadership. In fact, the purpose of our organisation over the last 3 or 4 years has been to end the chaos of the accidental manager. The accidental manager, the person that's promoted due to tenure or due to technical ability and technical skills, and not through management skills, and they haven't had the formal training. So end the chaos of the accidental manager and bring forward the intentional leader. And the intentional leader is those that act with intent, that have both the character and the competency that management and leadership requires to lead people and lead organisations. And I felt it apt when Nikki came out with the title Living an Intentional Life, because it goes so well and fits so well with intentional leadership. So what are some of the key concepts Nikki'd like to bring to the fore today? She wants to talk about some of the theories around living an intentional life and the benefits to personal resilience. She wants to complete a life stocktake to identify areas that would benefit from living more intentionally, and looking at a range of tools and resources to help you, our audience, to build a more intentional life. And I think it's poignant that we start the session as a courage through crisis is the title of today's session. We start with living an intentional life, because once again, these are the sort of skills and resources we'll require to get through this period. Nikki Gibson is, as I said, our New Zealand facilitator and is an executive coach. She's got both learning and development experience with over 20 years of experience in human resources, in management and leadership. Nikki has held director and general manager roles within the hotel industry and more recently within the fintech industry. An accredited coach, Nikki is passionate about helping both organisations and individuals reach their potential. Nikki is an engaging and dynamic facilitator and is an accredited administrator, interpreter and trainer with a wide range of assessments and programs such as GENOS, HBDI, MBTI. You'll have to tell me what these are, Nikki. The Coaching Clinic and the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I'm so delighted to have a New Zealand facilitator. We have wonderful New Zealand members on the line today. I know Nick, our New Zealand manager, Nick Everett, is in the generator in Auckland with many of the staff and businesses in the generator. So I welcome you, and I welcome Nikki from New Zealand to lead off today with building resilience through living an intentional life. Over to you, Nikki.
Great, Sam. Thank you so much for the great introduction and the warm welcome. It's great to be with everybody here this morning and kicking off what looks like a fabulous day. So just to reiterate one of the points Sam made, please make sure that you have your action plan handy. It would also be useful for you to have a pen and paper so you can note down anything that you want to through this session. And we should have plenty of time for some questions at the end. So again, please note down anything that you might like to ask. So as well as the intro that Sam gave me, I'd also like to just talk a little bit about how I came to be interested in this particular topic. I started working with executives and leadership teams on wellbeing and resilience through emotional intelligence probably about 6 years ago. Which led to me becoming really interested in wellbeing, both from an individual perspective, but also from a business perspective in terms of the value that it adds to an organisation. So 2020, What a year, huh? So for my husband and I, our story started a couple of years ago when we decided that 2020 was going to be a big year for us. There were a few things coming together this year. My husband turns 50, our little girl starts school next year, and I had a close friend who was diagnosed with terminal cancer. So the planets sort of seemed to align and steer us towards making 2020 a bucket list year, to take 6 months off work and to do some slow travel. So our objective with that was to take a decent break from work, to spend some quality time together as a family, to reassess our goals and make plans for the next stage of our lives. And I hoped to come back from the trip having had some sort of epiphany about what I wanted to do next in my career. So it all happened, but just not in the way that we expected. One of the things I'd done in the 2 years of planning was very cleverly negotiate myself out of a permanent role and into a fixed term contract that would see me through until April. So April came, and instead of sunning ourselves and lounging around on a Greek island, I found myself unemployed, in lockdown, and with my family 24/7. Maybe a case of be careful what you wish for. Ironically, lockdown actually offered us all of what we were looking for, but just not in the way that we had planned. So with some time on my hands, I started studying, I kept up my networking, and I went back to coaching. And again, stars seemed to align. I had a bit of an aha moment when I asked myself, what would happen if I combined the principles of human-centered design with the career consulting I was starting to do, and also the passion I have for well-being? And when I started playing with those concepts and bringing them together, I realized that actually that led me to be a lot more resilient and able to deal with the disappointments and the challenges that this year has brought. So as well as working through this myself, I've also had several coaching clients who have come along on the journey and are realizing some great outcomes already. What I'd like to do today is to share with you the rationale behind the concept of building resilience through living a more intentional life, and share some of the tools that I've used on my journey. And actually yesterday would have been the day that we would have arrived back in New Zealand after our trip. So it feels quite appropriate to be reflecting and sharing some of these things with you all today. So what are we going to cover off this morning? I'd like to talk a little bit more about the concept of building resilience through living an intentional life. Then we'll delve into purpose, look at where to start, dig into how to develop intent, and then finish off with how to live with intent. So the concept. Has anyone ever done that activity, maybe in a team building session, where you're blindfolded and spun around and around? After you stop spinning, it's impossible to tell which direction you're moving in. And if you do start moving, then you tend to stumble around for quite a while before you regain your sense of balance and place. The impact of things that life throws at us that really test our resilience are like being blindfolded and spun, except we usually don't see them coming, and we pretty much don't ever put up our hand and volunteer for them. Viktor Frankl, in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, said that we can't avoid suffering, but we can choose how to cope and find meaning and move forward with renewed purpose. So we're never going to be able to prevent things from coming along and knocking us off track, but we can set ourselves up to be in a good position to be able to regroup and refocus. The best way to be able to do that is by having a sense of what our path through life looks like and where it's taking us. A sense of purpose about what we're here for gives us the motivation to practice the habits that set us up for resilience. If we don't know where we're wanting to go, it's harder to get started again. So there are many definitions of resilience, and the one that I've shared with you there today is that it's the ability to experience something stressful without letting it destroy your resolve, sense of purpose, or hopes for the future. And while there are many, many definitions of resilience, there are also numerous lists of habits that we should be practicing for resilience. And I like to break them into the 3 categories of mind, body, and spirit. So mind is around mindfulness, meditation, continuous learning, consciously, cognitively reframing, making a choice to be optimistic, journaling, setting goals, prioritization, and choosing focus. Body, around exercise, sleep, nutrition, limiting alcohol. And then spirit, the habits of gratitude, appreciation, savouring, purpose, relationships and social connection, nature and spirituality. So you can see in here there are some examples of habits that align to each category, and all of those habits have screeds of scientific and academic research that prove the impact that they make to our brain chemistry and overall well-being. I'm not going to go into that in depth today, but there's a lot of information out there if you are interested in it. So a lot of these are probably familiar to you, and you may already be practicing them. Or you may intellectually know that they're good for you, yet maybe not have quite been able to break through that barrier between knowing something and actually doing it and believing in it. As you look at the three categories, it's likely that we all have current strengths in maybe one or two areas, and perhaps there's one or two that we don't practice so much, and that represents opportunity. We know that we maximise our resilience when we focus across all three of these areas. So how does resilience work with intentional living? Commitment to living an intentional life gives us reason, motivation, and focus for practicing these habits. And in return, practicing the habits supports our intentionality. It really becomes a virtuous cycle. An example for myself, I've always struggled to make regular exercise a habit. And this is the first year in my life that I've been able to do that with regular swimming and running. And certainly what made the difference for me was having more clarity on why I wanted to do it rather than telling myself that I should. So what is an intentional life? And what does it mean to live one? The Cambridge Dictionary defines intention as something that you want and plan to do, an aim. I tend to think of living an intentional life as around taking ownership of it, making deliberate decisions and not just letting it happen to you. Intentional living means having an aim for how you want to live your life. It's about defining what you want your life to look like and having a plan to move you towards that life. I think we all sit somewhere on this intentionality continuum. So at the low end, this looks like, yeah, go with the flow, unplanned, life just happens, we roll with it. And there's some positives there, right? It means we're open to all of the opportunities that come along. The downside of that is that sometimes that means we miss the important ones. We can get a little bit seduced perhaps by the things that look bright and shiny. And if we don't really understand what's going to make us truly happy, then we can make the wrong decision. So for example, this could look like choosing to take a well-paying job over a job that would actually be more intrinsically rewarding for us. At the other end, or the other extreme, really high intentionality is around definite purpose, having a detailed plan, and all decisions being made really consciously. And that works for some people, that's okay. But the benefit is that we're not making mistakes or wasting our time and energy. But the downside means that we can be too rigid and lose the ability to pivot. And I remember coaching a general manager some time ago. He was quite a young guy, probably in his late 20s. And he had his life plan in an Excel workbook. Not just an Excel spreadsheet, but a whole Excel workbook with formulas and color codes and everything. He was very, very intentional and very planned. The challenge for him was if something happened that he hadn't prepared for, and we were working in hotels, so lots of things happened he hadn't prepared for, maybe being offered a role before he was ready for it or being asked to relocate, he would go into a major tailspin because it didn't fit into the plan he had for his life. So a lot of the time that I spent coaching him was helping him to move along this continuum and actually step back from being so highly intentional in his life. I think that we probably want to aim to be somewhere in the middle, maybe slightly towards the higher end. It depends on what's right for you. So for some of us, it means maybe intentionally taking a step to the left. And for others of us, it might be moving intentionally towards the right. But I think the key thing here is that quote that you see, if we don't stand for something, we could fall for anything. So having some sort of intent is incredibly important to live a fulfilling life. So that's a bit of background around the concept. Let's now jump into talking about purpose. And I think that purpose gets a bit of a bad rap sometimes. That concept that we all have some sort of cosmic purpose and it's our mission in life to find it can make many people uncomfortable. Maybe that's because we feel like we're incompetent if we haven't figured it out yet, or maybe it's a bit off-putting because it might feel a little bit deep or a bit touchy-feely for some of us. There can also be a feeling that purpose has to be some big, lofty, humanity-changing goal. And I had an epiphany earlier this year when I listened to a talk by an amazing lady called Lisa O'Neill. And she said something that I found really liberating. She was talking about her purpose and coming to peace with the fact that it's okay to have a simple purpose. So living a good life, having fun, making the most of opportunities, and trying to be a good person is still a purpose, even if it's maybe not going to change the world. Mark Manson, who wrote the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a XXX, and others, suggests that a more helpful question than what is my life purpose is what can I do with my time that's important, which feels like a more manageable question without all of the baggage. He has 7 other quite unconventional questions to ponder that can help you answer the big one. And I think the details of that will be included in the resources you're going to be sent after this session. Simon Sinek also talks about purpose a lot, and he simplifies it to defining what is your why. And then another useful concept, or actually concepts, is Ikigai. And Ikigai is something I've spent quite a lot of time researching and understanding this year. And something that was surprising for me was to discover that actually there are 2 different Ikigais in many ways. So the original concept is Japanese, and this original Ikigai concept is essentially around having a reason to get up in the morning or a reason to enjoy life. It's about embracing the joy of the little things, being in the here and now, reflecting on past happy memories, and having the frame of mind that we can build a happy and active life. It's not about professional success or entrepreneurship. The beauty of Ikigai is that you can have more than one. It changes as you grow, and more importantly, it's essentially the process of cultivating our own inner potential. You discover your Ikigai after self-reflection. So really, you already have it. You just have to give yourself the time and space to find it. And in this classic interpretation of Ikigai, there are a lot of similarities with some of those resilience habits we talk about, like gratitude and mindfulness. What I was more familiar with, and possibly many of you are also, is the other version of Ikigai that you see on the screen there, which is, I guess, a westernized version. This is actually based on Andreas Zunger's theory of purpose, and somebody swapped out the word purpose with the word Ikigai, and it became a thing. So this is a really useful model as well, I think, because it looks at understanding and tapping into what we love, what the world needs, what we're good at, and what we can be paid for. And once we understand that, that gives us insight into our passion, our mission, our vocation, and our profession. And when those things intersect, that's when we find purpose or Ikigai. One of my coaching clients actually recreated this Ikigai Venn diagram on her wall with blackboard paint and sort of scribbles ideas down on it whenever she walks past, and she's had some great insights and ideas out of that. So I think both Ikigai concepts are really helpful. in either of them, in order to find it, we need to really know ourselves and take the time to understand what we value and care about. I think, though, when we talk about purpose overall, what's most important is to find the level and the depth of purpose that feels right for you. So you may choose to base this on one of the concepts or models that we've talked about this morning, or another, or you could create your own blend, which is really what I've done. The key is to have something that sets that direction for you. So now that we've talked a little bit more about the concept and purpose, we're going to look at where to start. So this is the concept of life satisfaction. And it's useful to take stock of where we're at now through assessing how satisfied we are with a number of key areas in our life. This can do a few things. One, it gives us insight into areas that perhaps we don't think about as much and could benefit from some more focus and intentionality. And also it can act as a bit of a figurative ground zero. So if we're wanting to do some work on ourselves and our intentionality and our resilience, then it can be useful to do this at the beginning of the process and then maybe do it again at the end and use it as an opportunity to assess the progress that we've made. So the diagram that you see on the screen there is the Wheel of Life. It's a commonly used tool and there's a lot of different versions. We'll be sending you a link, one with your resources. What's great about the Wheel of Life is that you can adapt it. So if the headings maybe don't really make sense to you, the language might not resonate, or if there's something that's important in your life that's not represented, then you can change that around. The key areas that are usually included in a Wheel of Life are business and career. So that's how satisfied are you with your job? Is it the job that you'd imagined, or would you rather be pursuing something else? Does it bring you happiness and satisfaction? Finance, is your income enough to meet all your basic needs and other needs and wants? Do you have a lot of loans or debts? Do you have a financial plan? Health, how physically and mentally healthy are you? How do you feel? Are you satisfied with your weight, your diet, your exercise routines? Do you have any pain or discomfort? Family and friends. Are your friends supportive, unconditional and trustworthy? Do you have friendships that you can build on and friends that you can always count on? Do you get to spend enough time with them? Romance. Have you found happiness and love? Personal development. How do you deal with your personal growth? Are you open to new experiences and eager to learn? Are you spiritually connected to the inner and outer world in the way you would like to be? Fun and recreation. Are you enjoying life? Do you practice hobbies or sports? How do you spend your free time? Contribution. Do you help others? Do you volunteer? To what extent are you active in clubs, in the community, or taking care of others? So the important thing with completing a life satisfaction map is that it's not placing any relevant or relative value on each of these areas. The concept is as simple as how satisfied are you with this area of your life? So for example, if there was something in there that wasn't important to me at all, let's say finance, I might be in a really bad shape financially, but actually I'm quite satisfied with it. So it might still rate quite high. Now that's probably an extreme example and unlikely to happen, but the key thing is, are you happy with where your life is at in these key areas? And because it's a wheel, if we see disparity, like the example you can see on the screen there, that can mean we're in for a little bit of a bumpy ride. So what we're looking for is the opportunity to just balance things out in our life or realign the wheel so that things are a little bit smoother for us. So that's the idea of the life stock take and a life satisfaction map. Great place to start to figure out where you're at and what you want to focus on. So I do like a good Venn diagram. This isn't quite as pretty as the Ikigai one, but it's one that I've put together that captures the 3 areas that have been most helpful for me and my coaching clients this year. So as always, it's where things intersect that they get interesting. So who we are as a person can be seen as a combination of our values and our strengths, what's important to us and what we're good at. Our purpose, or why, can come out of our values and the vision that we have for our life. So what's important to me and where do I want to be? And then our vision and our strengths together open up awareness of opportunities that perhaps we may not have been aware of. And it's the intersection of them all that give us the foundations to be more intentional. So I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's been around for a long time, but it stands the test of time. And it's something that I actually take my clients back to quite often, as well as going back to myself. One of the habits is begin with the end in mind. So let's start thinking about our intentional life by imagining looking back at it. So our vision is really the future that we imagine for ourselves. Covey talks about imagining your 80th birthday. Who is there to celebrate with you and what do they say about you in their speeches? The old saying that no one ever died wishing they'd spent more time at work. So what do you want to spend your time on? What difference do you want to make? When you look back, what do you want to see in your life? Mark Manson, who I mentioned earlier, one of his more confrontational styles of questions is, if you knew that you were going to die 1 year from today, what would you do and how would you want to be remembered? There are a whole lot of online resources that can help to guide you to create a vision, and thousands of examples of vision statements that you can read for inspiration and ideas. These range from the lofty to the pragmatic. And again, like with purpose, it's important to find something that sits well with you and find your own style. Another way to approach visioning is to ask yourself what your best life would look like. And if you're a visual person, creating a vision board with pictures can be really motivating. If you're more of a words person, journaling is another useful technique. Writing stories for yourself, writing letters. We're going to take a few minutes now to do some visualization. Sorry, a bit of a mouthful. So I would like to invite you to close your eyes or just look down and reflect. And I'm just going to ask a few questions, and I just want you to notice what comes into your mind. Don't judge it, just notice where your mind goes, and think about what your best life could look like. So close your eyes, allow yourself to imagine and try and create a vivid picture. If you find it hard to visualize, then focus in maybe on how your life would feel. So imagine your life in some years from now. It could be 2, 5, 10, 20 or more, or take Stephen Covey's suggestion and imagine your 80th birthday. So what will you have already accomplished? How will you feel about yourself? What kind of people are in your life? How do you feel about them? What does your ideal day look like? Where are you? Where do you live? Think specifics. What country, city, state? What type of community? Are you in the city, the country, at the beach? Do you live in a house or an apartment? What's the style? What's the atmosphere? Is the sun shining? What are you doing? Are you with another person, a group of people, or are you by yourself? How are you dressed? What does your physical body look like? How do you feel about that? What's your state of mind? Happy or sad? Contented or frustrated? Does looking at this best life make you smile? If not, then it's an opportunity to dig deeper and dream bigger. So thank you for coming on that little journey with me. Obviously, it's not something that we can fully realise in a short visualisation over a webinar. But hopefully there was some threads or some things that you saw in that you can pick up and follow through from after what you've experienced just now. The research supports the idea that with a vision in mind, we're much, much more likely to succeed far beyond what we would otherwise achieve. The reality is, if we don't develop our own vision, we'll stay down that far low end of the intentionality continuum and allow other people and circumstances to direct the course of our life. The next area to think about then is values. And again, this is another thing that can't be rushed. It's definitely worth taking the time to really put some time aside to sit down and work through this. So what are values? Ultimately, they are a way of being or believing that we hold important. In many ways, they're the roots that ground us and the subconscious guardians that guide our decisions. Living intentionally means living in accordance with our values and making conscious decisions based on their guidance. Often it can be hard to articulate our values. We have a general sense of what's important to us and sometimes experience a resistance response if something happens that's not aligned with our values and triggers them, but it can be hard to put into words. When we can articulate our values, it's easier to make aligned decisions and also to identify when and why things might just not feel right. So it's worth spending the time considering and working through our values. There are a few ways to approach this. Again, there's a proliferation of online tools offering free values assessments. A limitation with these is that they're not always comprehensive, and our cognitive biases can often lead us to select words that we like or that we think we should be choosing rather than uncovering our true values. So I think a more useful process is to start by reflecting on some thought-provoking questions and then looking for themes. And there's some examples that you can see there on the screen of some thought-provoking questions, which are designed to really get you thinking around the things that you admire, the things you like, the things you don't like, but also digging deeper. So why? You know, and a really good technique to use if you're going through this yourself is to ask yourself why 5 times. Okay, and that will help you to dig deeper into your understanding. So who do you envy? Why? Why do they make you feel like that? Why do you respond in that way? Dig deep. Why? So you can do this by yourself, or you can do it with a friend or a colleague or a coach. Working with someone else can be really useful because they can help you to tune into patterns or themes that you might not recognize yourself and also probe deeper. It's a good idea to actually write down your answers or responses to these questions. And again, that's so you can notice words coming up, themes coming through that perhaps you wouldn't be aware of if you're just thinking it through in your head. After you've done that and spent some time going through questions like this, that's when having a look at a list of values can be useful to help to identify words that perhaps don't jump into your head automatically. So picking up a list of values, again, lots online. Brené Brown has a great list in her book, Dare to Lead. Highlighting the ones that resonate with you, maybe even circling the ones that really jump out, maybe crossing out the ones that don't sound like you at all. And it's important to suspend any judgment that you might have about the words being positive or negative. In themselves, these words are neutral. It's just our filters that change that. Once you have a list of words, then it's time to start putting them together in common themes. So clump things together that kind of make sense for you. And this is going to be different for everyone because we all read the words that you see up on the screen there and interpret them slightly differently. So the way you choose to put them together is the right way for you. Ideally, we're looking for around about 4 values, maybe 3 to 5 or 6. We don't want too many or it becomes too difficult to use them to reference back. So when you've got your themes or your groups or your clusters, choose one of the words to be the main describing word for that particular cluster. You can use then the other words to help support and describe the main ones. So for example, I had a coaching client who had a value he called freedom. And underneath that, he had independence, flexibility, choice, and variety. So those were the other values or ideas that described in his own way what freedom meant to him. And it's really important to add those because we don't always spend a lot of time being really conscious about our values, and we can come back to them and forget actually what they mean to us if we don't really build that, that foundation and that extra explanation around them. So for example, looking at these clusters or themes, they could be distilled into perhaps learning, contribution, and achievement. And once we have clarity of our values, we can use them to lean into difficult situations. So for example, here in Auckland, we went very suddenly back into lockdown just over a month or so ago. And I had a client who was really struggling with that and finding it very difficult to get her head around and to stay positive. So we talked a lot about her values and how she could use those to help her to make sense of what was happening and to figure out the right thing to do. And in that particular situation, she had a value around community. So it was about understanding that if I want my economy to thrive, if I want kids back at school, if I want the local businesses to be staying viable, if I want all of those things to happen and the community to be in a good position, we need to get things back to normal as quickly as possible. And that's the best thing for people's well-being. Family was also really important to her, and she had older family members who were vulnerable. So tapping into that, this is the best thing to do for my family, was another helpful thing to do. And then her value of responsibility helped to guide her to make decisions about when she was going to wear a mask. Masks weren't mandated here in Auckland at the time for anything, but she chose to tap into that value of responsibility and wear a mask more often than she had to because it felt like it was the right thing to do for her. So values can be really useful again to help us to navigate some of those disappointing or challenging circumstances and find sense and the way forward from them. The third area then to help us to build our intentionality is strengths. And I think it's really useful to have a good understanding of what we're good at. This helps to build our self-awareness and uncover opportunities that we might not otherwise consider. It can also give us some ideas and opportunities for growth and development. So when you know your strengths, you can improve your life and thrive. Research shows that people who use their strength a lot are 18 times more likely to be flourishing than those who don't use your strengths at all. I think this whole area of strengths is especially useful if you're thinking about a career change or a significant life change. And again, there are many different ways of approaching the process. So let's begin with technical or professional strengths. Start with some self-reflection. Think about your career highlights, maybe awards that you've won, feedback received, performance reviews, recognition. Have a look at your CV and LinkedIn profile and look at what you highlight about yourself in those. Talk to others and seek their feedback. Think about what you most enjoy. What you really love doing is often linked to what you're good at. When it comes to character strengths, it can be a little bit more challenging. The VIA Institute on Character has a really cool science-based free online tool that will help you to uncover your unique profile. It's made up of 24 strengths across 6 what they call virtue areas, which are wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. It's a really great website with lots of resources and research that you can access. And what you'll possibly find is that the character strengths you uncover will align or overlap sometimes with your values. and in that way deepen our self-awareness across both areas. The key thing with strengths is that we can't leverage or intentionally use something that we're not aware of. So let's summarise by coming back to our diagram here. So our purpose, or our why, can come out of our values and the vision that we have for our life. This might be where you may choose to craft a mission or a purpose statement. At its simplest level or version, it's an expression of how we want to live, which is our values, in order to achieve our vision. So, for example, thinking about the values we were talking about earlier, a purpose or mission statement could sound something like to live a life of learning, contribution, and achievement so that I can maybe leave the world a better place for my grandchildren, if that was my vision. So it can be something quite simple like that. Who we are can be seen as a combination of our values and our strengths. Our vision and our strengths open up awareness of opportunities, and the intersection of them all is what gives us the foundations to be intentional. So having these things in place allow us to be intentional through wayfaring. And this is a concept from the book Design Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. They talk about wayfaring being what the old-time explorers did when they discovered the New World. They knew what they were looking for, and they had tools to guide them, like the stars and a compass, but they didn't have a map. We've probably all experienced a GPS or Google Maps giving us a random route to take and second guessing it because it doesn't feel right, or having a fight with our partner because they want to follow the GPS and we want to go the other way. In life, a map can be a little bit like that Excel workbook I was talking about earlier, with everything planned out that we see at that extremely high end of the intentionality continuum. It can actually stifle us. On the other hand, when we know where we're going, because we have a vision and we have the tools to guide us, our values and our strengths, we can wayfare and explore life as we go, knowing that we're making the right decisions along the way to support us in where we want to be, and taking the time to go the scenic route if that's what we want to do. So we've talked about the concept of building resilience to live an intentional life. We've talked about purpose. We've talked about taking a stock take and where to start. And we've explored the 3 areas for developing intent. I want to just finish off by talking about living with intent. Because if we're going to invest the time and the energy in ourselves to come up with a plan or a blueprint for our life, it's important to translate that into action. Otherwise, it can become a personal version of those corporate exercises that we've all done and never really see the light of day. So the first consideration is using our vision, our values, and our strengths to help guide decision-making that's aligned to our intent. When we have a career, life, or leadership choice, we're less likely to be distracted by the bright and shiny and more enabled to choose the direction that is going to help us to achieve our vision and make us truly happy. The next thing to think about is how we make the changes we want to support us to live an intentional life. And 2 really useful pieces of work in this space are Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg and the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. So Tiny Habits is all about a methodology to take baby steps to create meaningful change. An example used is the author hated flossing his teeth. So he committed to floss 1 tooth every day as his tiny habit. And that was so achievable that he did it every day. And of course, once you floss 1 tooth, the chances are you're going to go along and floss them all. Atomic Habits has some similar advice. It talks about psychologically we're wired to want instant gratification, but not all habits give immediate rewards. In fact, a lot of them delay gratification for quite some time. So how do we help ourselves to pursue good habits? We need to make them obvious, attractive, and easy. And one of the ways to make them easy is to focus on what the author calls gateway habits. Similar to tiny habits, it's the smallest piece of the habit that can reasonably be achieved in 2 minutes. So if your goal is to eventually run a marathon, the gateway habit is putting on your running shoes every day. Another concept from Atomic Habits is to focus on identity. So rather than thinking to myself, I'm on a diet, I tell myself I'm a healthy eater. Or in the example of running a marathon, the moment of most significant change is when I start to self-identify as a runner. Then the habit isn't a chore anymore, but it's a part of who I am. And then the third part in terms of living a more intentional life is how committed are you and what is your commitment to it? So with that in mind, I invite you to consider 3 commitments to action that you're going to make as an outcome of this session. What will you stop doing? What will you start doing? And what will you continue doing? Thank you.
Nikki, thank you so much. What a terrific presentation to kick off today's virtual development day. It was certainly a deep and powerful insight into living an intentional life, and I thank you so much for bringing that to the fore and to sharing it with our audience. What are you going to stop doing? What are you going to start doing? And what are you going to continue doing? I think is a fantastic way that reflects both back on the action plan itself. So please complete those action plans as you go through. We do have an opportunity. We've got about 5 minutes for questions. I know we're getting some terrific feedback here from participants saying what a wonderful presentation it was, Nikki. So thank you very much. A couple of questions just to kick off that people actually put in before the session, Nikki. So this comes from Nathalie. Pivoting the intentional life when confronted with a life event such as a disability or illness or cancer, things like that. How do you pivot an intentional life when confronted with major life events?
Yeah, great question. I think for me that comes back to thinking about the continuum and thinking about where you intentionally position yourself on that continuum. Because if we're too far up the high intent end, then pivoting in any situation becomes really difficult. But if we have that concept of, I know where I want to go, but I accept that the way I get there may change and may be different, and tapping into our values to help us get through that initial point of distress when something really significant happens, I think those are the things that set us up to be able to get back on track. And I think it's also important to note that our vision can change. You know, we don't set one vision at the age of 20 and that's it for the rest of our lives. I think it's useful to come back to this regularly and actually check in and ask ourselves, is this still the right thing for me? Has something in my life been so fundamental that actually I need to make a shift about what it is I want to do?
Thank you, Nikki. Another question, just on in a similar vein. How do you pivot an intentional life if it is going to negatively affect someone else? That's from Hayley.
Oh, that's a good question and probably a really difficult question to answer without a little bit more context, which is probably not possible right now.
Should we take that on notice and come back to Hayley? Hayley, we will come back to you with a response to that. Just quickly back to the content of the presentation. What was the website that you mentioned? This is from Kathy. That was good for helping identify character strengths.
VIA Institute on Character, and I believe that's part of the resource list that's going to be shared by the IML team as part of the follow-up.
That will be sent out afterwards. Someone's just asked about the action plan. I think they came on late. The action plan was sent in the email last night, so it's a document for each of the sessions where you can write the 3 things that you've taken away from today's session and what you'll start, stop, and continue. How can I cultivate a balanced outlook and not hyper focus on one area and not neglect others? How can I cultivate a balanced outlook and not hyper focus on one area?
Yeah, I think that's where the Wheel of Life is a really useful tool, because that allows us to see the areas that would benefit from more focus. And I think with a lot of this, it's about once you get that understanding and you can see visually like, wow, this is really out of whack, then that's a really good first step to take, because it shows you and gives you some motivation to do something about that. And then I think thinking about, again, those tiny habits, what are the little things that I can do? So even if I'm really preoccupied by something that's pretty significant and important, can I find 2 minutes in a day to make a step towards something else that I want to focus on? So we're not looking for massive shifts, because that's really difficult. We're looking for small things that we can do to start shifting from one thing to another.
Thanks, Nikki. I think this is the time of the signs. Danielle has asked the question, resetting goals in isolation is not an easy process, especially when fitness lifestyles have been compromised due to lockdowns, or for Melburnians totally removed. In your experience, what advice, tips, tools can you provide to high performers motivated by striving and exceeding in this time?
Sure, great question. And I think one of the things that's been amazing to see this year is how many people have stepped up and offered tools, resources and support. So I have been able to access a huge number of things just online, people offering free webinars, free coaching, online gym classes, all of those sorts of things. So I think there is a lot out there. I think the other thing that's really important for us that we've all learned this year is connection. So who do you have in your circle that is like-minded, that might want to work on this with you? And can you get together with a buddy or a small group of people where you actually keep each other motivated, keep each other together and work on your goals together? Can be really successful as well.
One specific question, how can we create a good listening skills habit during conversation?
By biting your tongue and not talking.
Good answer. Good answer. Now, there's been a number of questions saying, will we get the recording? You will get the recording of this along with the resources that Nikki has mentioned throughout after all the sessions today. So that will be tonight. Final question, because I know we've got 1 minute left, Nikki. Is there a Wheel of Life type exercise that is specifically focused on careers? I would be interested to hear this idea. And can it be narrowed to working an intentional career? That's from Sarah.
The answer is yes. You can adapt it to anything. I haven't personally come across one that is specifically designed just for aspects of career, but it would certainly be something that I would, if I was coaching somebody, for example, we could design something like that together. So a lot of the tools that you'll find for Wheel of Life actually allow you to plug your own headings or your own categories into the template. So you can create your own for whatever aspect you're looking for. But it's a great question, because I think it's useful to evaluate the different aspects of our career in the same way that we do our life.
Well, Nikki, thank you so much. We've run out of time, but I've got an enormous number of comments and through here saying what an excellent session you've provided this morning. So thank you very much for giving up your time. Certainly a powerful insight into living an intentional life. We've got a number of people from across New Zealand and Tasmania and Adelaide saying what a great session it is. So it's wonderful to bring together such a great mix of people to hear from you and your content. And if anyone would like to hear more from Nikki, please inquire through IML, info@managersandleaders.com.au. As I said, Nikki's based in New Zealand, but virtually in this virtual world of COVID, we can operate anywhere. So please let us know. We've also got a hashtag there. I note that the marketing team are doing a lot of work across social media for today. IML Development Day. So hashtag IML Development Day. So look out for some of the posts there, and please share your comments and the things that you've taken away from each of the sessions today on social media if you would like. So thanks again to Nikki, and thank you to the large audience that's joined us for the first session this morning. It's been really insightful. We move next to Ty Vincent Spavero on adapting resilience during uncertainty and change. And I know Ty will bring certainly a lot of energy to his presentation, as he always does. That starts at 10:30 Australian Eastern Time and 1:30 New Zealand time. So we look forward to for you joining us all again at that session. As I said at the beginning, if you would like to come to the lunchtime networking session, there are still some places available. Please email us at info@managersandleaders.com.au to get the Zoom link. You'll break into Zoom groups and an opportunity to network with both the facilitators like Nikki and also with each other. So please, if you would like to come to that, email us and we can send you a link. First in, best served, limited to 100 people. Thank you very much, Nikki. Thank you for everyone joining us. We'll see you all in half an hour. Thanks,
everyone. Bye now.